This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
Repeat after me. The government cannot keep me safe. It can only annoy me. If you understand this one basic fact of life, you can save yourself years or even decades of security theater. President Donald Trump this week ended a big element of security theater when he eliminated the shoes off part of the airport experience. All of it, the TSA airport screenings, the shoes off, all of it owes to just 2 bad days in 2001. And shout out to Anna Hoffman, by the way, friend of the program. Her Twitter handle, Shoes On Please, turns out it was ahead of its time. And that's the cool thing about being on Team Reality. You can just sit still and the whole rest of the world comes to you, eventually. That first bad day in 2001 was 9/11. We had 3,000 people die after foreigners who were on the federal government's radar hijacked and crashed 4 planes across the East Coast. The fruits of 9/11 were 2 20-year wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We lost thousands of American boys fighting those wars. We burned trillions of dollars not winning those wars. If someone had told you on 9/11, with the smoke still billowing from the fallen 2 towers, that America's response would be 2 20-year wars we did not win, you'd never believe it. But that's exactly what happened. Welcome to life in a security state, where the men with guns look big and powerful, but they never stop anything before it happens. They show up afterward, they look strong and menacing, long after any danger is past. Say it with me this time. The government cannot keep me safe. It can only annoy me. You ever wonder how 9/11 happened in the first place? So, the 90s starts, 1991, we spin the Soviets into the poorhouse. The Soviet Union collapses. It's the unipolar world. America's the only superpower. It's a situation pretty much not seen in history. Well, I guess like since the Roman Empire. But how does it happen, though? That a decade after we beat the Soviets, the Afghans we fought alongside and the Saudi Arabians we're still close with collaborate to bring us the deadliest day in U.S. history. That unipower world only lasted a decade, 1991 to 2001. And so the 90s, the decade I grew up in, are my absolute favorite. But you know how the 90s are perceived by people who grew up in any other decade, before or since? As a holiday from history. Let's think about it. 1901, the 1900s. September 1901, President William McKinley assassinated. It's a bad start to a new century. Look no further than 9/11 to see how one bad day in September can reverberate decades later. 1910s, creation of the U.S. income tax and World War I. 1920s, Prohibition and the start of the Great Depression. 1930s, the Great Depression. 1940s, World War II. 1950s, Civil Rights strife. 1960s, you had civil rights still going on. You had the assassinations of JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and RFK, all within a 5-year period. Oh, and by the way, you also had Vietnam. 70s, you have Watergate, you have the end of Vietnam, you have gas shortages, and you have the Jimmy Carter presidency. And need I say more? 1980s, those kids remember looking at countdown clocks to nuclear war. I had to be told about this years later. I didn't grow up thinking about stuff like that, looking at stuff like that. By the time I was conscious, I was already living in a holiday from history. If you look back at those decades, the next best decade to grow up in the 20th century would be the 80s. The others were too clouded by national and international crisis. Oh, and by the way, good luck being black in any of those decades until about the 60s. 100 years ago in Detroit in 1925, a man named Ossian Sweet had his home mobbed when he dared to buy a house in a white neighborhood on the city's east side. The mob gathered, and Sweet and his family had to shoot their way out of the house. One of the men in the mob died, and his court case created what we now know as the Castle Doctrine, The idea that a man's home is his castle and he has a right to defend that castle. Judge Frank Murphy's ruling made Ossian Sweet, a black man, as much a king in his home as the King of England is in his. This was a sea change, and it swept the nation, and it all started in Detroit. That was 100 years ago. Now imagine what life was like 101 years ago, and you see the problem. Now let's look at the decades since the 90s. They're not any better. 2000s, 9/11. America goes from strong and untouchable to fearful and fretful overnight. We say, God, we feel so unsafe. You got to pass the Patriot Act. Then we had a recession so great that America said, a black man, Barack Hussein Obama, needs to be the one who fixes the finances. When America turns to a black man to fix the finances, you know things have gone pretty far afield. That was the 2000s. And by the way, can we talk about these Septembers? September 1901, President McKinley assassinated. September 2001, 9/11. When we leave a time capsule for people in the future, we need to leave behind a warning. Beware the events of September 2101. Let's try not to have a life-changing event for the first time in 3 centuries. Let's just try something different in September 2101. I won't be there, but I wish you guys well. 2010s, we have mass surveillance, unearthed by Glenn Greenwald. Turns out our government does, or at very least can, listen to every phone call we make. It can intercept every text message we send. Again, we are told that the security state is great and infallible. And yet none of this mass surveillance prevented a single school shooting, a single mass shooting, a single terrorist act. And by now you must see the point. The government will not keep you safe. It will only annoy you. They can see what book you checked out at the library, what book you bought on Amazon. They can listen to your phone calls, and they've seen your nudes. Yet when it comes to actually keeping your body safe in actual emergencies, they cannot. They will not. They do not, and they have not. They show up with big guns in large numbers after the damage has been done. 2020s are our worst decade yet by a country mile, probably our worst since the 1930s. We've taken big steps backward this decade in terms of our freedom. From COVID and the idea that all 330 million Americans should hide from a man-made version of the flu, to the January 6th persecutions. You know, you would think that like 9/11 might be the FBI's biggest case in its history, of kind of a bad day. You know what actually was? January 6th. January 6th. That's your security state. You have a narco-tyranny from Black Lives Matter, the Palestinians, the illegals. Life has become a permanent color revolution in the 2020s. You have lawfare. You have the attempted assassination of Donald Trump 2 times. I think it's ridiculous, obviously, if you're listening, that one bad day in 2001 turned into 2 endless wars. So imagine my anger when a man-made version of the flu, COVID, was used to justify shredding the American idea of freedom. Who's ever heard of a months-long or years-long emergency? But that's what we had during COVID. It's emergency powers that our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, used to shatter small businesses and close private schools, all while keeping liquor stores and dispensaries open. That had happened on President Trump's watch. That 15 days to stop the spread emanated from the Trump White House showed the scale of our government problem. They really can get to anybody. Here was the guy elected to set America free from the deep state. And here was the deep state in the diminutive form of Dr. Anthony Fauci telling Trump to unplug the economy and plug it back in, like some kind of H-1B IT guy, all for the sake of public health. And Trump actually does it. Not only does he do it, he scolds a guy like Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, a fellow Republican, for reopening his state too soon. He argues on TV that hairdressers are non-essential. And in that moment, he killed any prospect of being reelected. 81 trillion ballots later, the ghost of Joe Biden was installed as president. 5 years later, Brian Kemp is retiring from politics rather than run for a winnable Georgia Senate seat in 2026. The things we say, the things we do, the attitudes we hold, they matter. For a time, Trump fell for the COVID psyop because the deep state came in a form he did not expect. Not with a pushy, bloodthirsty general in the military, but from a little doctor who swore he was here to keep people safe. And what resulted from the COVID regime? What we saw was the public health state rise to power, trying to build a twin force to the military-industrial complex. The psyop failed, but had it worked, the military might have been called on someday to administer the jabs that people did not need and do not want. This would have been a perfect marriage. This would have been a Rockefeller marrying a Rothschild. They would have all the money and all the power any bureaucrat could want, and no one would ever have to face re-election. But would any of this have made you safe or gotten you healthy? Repeat it with me this time. The government cannot keep me safe. It can only annoy me. In the Biden years, getting an experimental vaccine wasn't just presented as the good and neighborly thing to do. Getting jabbed was not a helpful hint, as Governor Whitmer might say. Across America, companies and governments made the jab mandatory following Biden's lead. Some people fought back. Some people figured it out and got a different job. Some people were brave and sued and got their jobs back. But too many people compromised their health and risked it by taking a jab that was unproven, a medical intervention they neither wanted or needed. Some people will never recover from the damage done. See, the flu gets weaker over time, not stronger. Even the man-made version of it. Except in one instance, when people are staying home and staying safe and not getting exposed to the virus and not getting the antibodies, the protective antibodies that come with exposure. Except when people are locked down by order of the governor. 2020 was a bizarro world. We denied people cancer treatments out of COVID fear. We denied kids an education because of the flu. And then our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, after berating you to shut down your livelihood so as to save grandma's life, what did she do next? She moved sick people in with grandma at the nursing home you weren't allowed to visit. Stay home, stay safe, and save grandma's life. Turns out what that really meant was stay home and don't be around to speak up for grandma when I move sick people into her nursing home. The higher the death toll, the higher the scale of the emergency, the greater the need to use emergency powers, the greater the opportunity to claim America needed a national plan for COVID that only a man like Joe Biden could provide. The government cannot keep you safe. It can only annoy you. And don't even get me started on masks. Actually, I'd rather talk about shoes. That second bad day in 2001 was December 22nd. That's when a man named Richard Reed tried to light a shoe bomb on fire. From that one bad day, 20 plus years of shoes off at the airport resulted. As a government executive story in 2005 explains, in 2003, the Homeland Security Department clarified its shoe screening policy, saying screeners are instructed to encourage travelers to remove their shoes before entering the X-ray machines, but passengers are not required to do so. This little temporary blip in the travel process, 3 years later, became the standard across America. And it was not until 19 years after that, until this week, that shoes off theater, that security theater, a piece of it anyway, went away. In fact, it largely went unquestioned. I mean, we're all in it together, right? No one wants to have another 9/11, right? You'll do whatever it takes to prevent it, right? Even if it has nothing to do with safety. So to recap, 9/11 happens. This involves men, terrorists who were all on the government's radar prior to 9/11, but the FBI and CIA weren't sharing information. Rather than buy the FBI and CIA fax machines or get them email accounts so they could be in touch with one another, George W. Bush instead creates the Department of Homeland Security, a new cabinet agency. And now the all-powerful security state became even more powerful. But it wasn't enough, because it can never be enough. Totalitarians aren't known for leaving stuff out. Within the American state, there are forces that seek to maximize the state and minimize your freedom. This fight will take on different forms, but it's the fight of a lifetime. These systems of control are masked as public safety, public health, national security, public education. I was blessed to fly once in the 90s as a kid. It was a joy. Back in those days, even O.J. Simpson could show up last minute. And if you could make it to the gate, you were in. But one bad day in September, involving men who were all known to the government, and now you needed to bring a tent with you to the airport because you'd be camping there before your flight. All this security state, all the security theater, and it still wasn't enough. Now they wanted your shoes off and your belt too. Now they wanted to touch your bulge and make sure you weren't packing. 10 years later, that wasn't enough either. Only with mass surveillance could the big men with big guns keep us safe. Who needs human sources of information when you can just pluck phone call audio right out of the sky? All that mass surveillance, and it's never been used to bring down the drug cartels or their partners in America. It's never been used to track down the people who plotted to burn down American cities in 2020 and are trying again to do it now. It's never stopped one school shooting or one mass shooting. All those tools, all those men, all those guns across 2 continents, and somehow nobody overheard that Israel was going to suffer a deadly attack on October 7th, 2023. Make it make sense. These are the hazards of security theater. When you spend so much time faking the funk, you're not ready to face a true and actual threat. When you spend all day listening to your girlfriend's phone calls or targeting the political opposition of the president, you miss actual threats. The security state exists for its own benefit. Much like the public health industrial complex, this has little to do with you or your well-being. It's power for the sake of power, control for the sake of control. Remember that the next time you're asked to stay home, get a jab, wear a mask, or take off your shoes. Unfortunately, due to our collective performance in 2020, I can guarantee you there will be a next time. That we know. What will you do? That's the only question. The government will not keep you safe. It will only annoy you.